The integration theme was recorded in Logic Pro, and here's the session. When I record in any program, I always like to make audio tracks of everything and then make the mix from there. And when I do that, I hide all the virtual instruments. In order to see them, I can unhide them. Here they are. And let's select them all and then bring them back to life here. Okay, I think they're all back now. Let's take a look at the mixer. So there's no drums in the music in the score, but I felt like I should add some drums to this. I use Superior Drummer a lot from TuneTrack. I like this program. Of course, there are a zillion other options for drums, but this is the one that I use a lot, so I ended up using it for this piece. There are existing grooves inside here. I think I went through a bunch of these and picked some beats that I liked and then modified them inside of Logic to make it go with the hits and accents in my score. The only thing that I performed for real was the fill in the beginning of the video. I wanted to play the drums a little bit, and then you don't see me playing them anymore, but they're kind of grooving along in the background. That was all pre-programmed. I think I programmed the drums before everything else, though. The tracks that I played the drums to were from the notes that came out of Finale software, which I used to create the score. I saved the Finale file as a MIDI file, opened that up in Logic, and just used some temporary sounds at first to hear what was going on, and then programmed the drum beats and hits using those sounds. And then when I played all the sounds live for the video, I found new sounds with the instruments that ended up being chosen. So this is not the default kit. I think this is one of the Yamaha drum sets that I like to use a lot. There's so many. Anyway, in addition to the drums, I also use this effect. This is a free effect from Native Instruments. It comes with their complete start bundle. I like using this a lot on drums. I always use the basic parallel compression preset as a starting point, and then I sometimes modify it. Give some more power and intensity and punch to the drums. So the first instrument in the score was not a virtual instrument. It was actually my fretless bass. That's over here. It's a custom Soundtrade fretless bass with 5 strings. When I did the mix over here, it was going through one of Logic's amps, or it's a direct box. This is a simulation of an Avalon direct box. I think it's the U5, and you just choose one of the tones that you like, and that's that. And then I used a compressor. This is a compressor by Focusrite that came with my Claret 8 Pre X interface. I like this one a lot because it's really big. I use this when I record sometimes bass, but also when I mix bass sometimes, and I like using this almost always when I'm recording somebody singing. It goes through this first and then to the audio track. So how do you do that? Instead of having the vocal go into an audio track first, I have the vocal go into an auxiliary track with this compressor on it. So then the voice gets compressed a little through this Red 3 compressor, and then the output of the auxiliary track gets routed through a bus into an audio track. So that way the audio track gets the compressed vocal embedded into the audio. It's kind of like using an analog hardware unit, except I'm using this software instead. And then I did this big shootout. I wanted to use a subtle chorus effect on the bass. I tried so many of them. I have so many chorus effects. I was surprised. I ended up going with this one called Cyan from Reactor. There's so much to talk about with Reactor. I'm going to do complete albums that just use this program. It's a universe of possibilities. Anyway, inside the Reactor factory library, there's a number of really cool effects. Unlike other things, some of them are kind of conventional, like this isn't that unusual, this chorus effect, although it can get weird. But this one I like the most for some reason. I don't think I've ever used it before on my bass, but when I was just trying stuff for those 5 notes that I played, I liked this one, and that's why I ended up using Cyan. I think it was just this preset. I don't think I modified anything. Maybe I did, I don't remember. So anyway, back to the virtual instruments. I ended up using Omnisphere combined with a Logic instrument for this first virtual instrument track. That's the F sharp minor 9 chord in the beginning. And I did this a lot where I would use two or more instruments to create a sound. That's called a track stack in Logic. I use the summing stack where you can have this fader that shows up that combines two or more sounds, and then you get a new fader plus slots for effects and other things. There's another way to use a track stack where you don't have those features. I like having those features. I didn't add anything to it, but anyway, inside of the stack, you can see there's an Omnisphere sound and then a Sculpture sound. Sculpture is a Logic Pro instrument. These effects were probably part of some library preset. I always evaluate the effects that they give you in the library presets in Logic. If I don't like what the effects are doing, I get rid of them or I modify them. But anyway, back to Omnisphere. Omnisphere is amazing. If I wasn't teaching at different colleges and if I didn't have the opportunity to buy stuff for a deal, I would probably just be using Omnisphere for everything, and that would be it. This is all you need. There's thousands of sounds in this thing. One thing I like about Omnisphere is you can rate the patches that they give you. There's like 14 or 15,000 sounds it comes with. And over a course of a year or so, I rated all of the sounds. So how do you do that? Down here, you can select ratings, and you see all the stars. And then if you go to the patch browser, all of the sounds that have 5 stars are the ones that I like the most. And now there's 4, 3, 2, 1. It took a really long time to go through all of these sounds, but it's really helpful. So when I'm looking for a certain kind of a sound, you can use these categories, types, genres, or even an author if you want to find something by someone that you like. It limits the choices that you have. And if you sort them by rating, all of the 5 stars always show up on the top. Those are pre-approved for use by me. I know I'm going to like them. So that comes up first. I always find a great sound. It's rare that I have to modify it. If anything, I might go into the effects and change the effects, like turn off the reverb or something like that. But mostly Omnisphere just nails it. Anyway, so I wanted to use that first because I always use Omnisphere on client projects. It's usually the first thing I go to. It's just fast and easy. I had to use this transpose effect a lot in this project to make it an octave higher so that when I played the chord, it would be the same octave as the Sculpture sound. I just doubled Omnisphere with this. I wanted to include something from Logic, and this kind of helps. Sculpture is a physical modeling synthesizer. It's really good for mallet instruments and bells, things like that. That's why I used a vibraphone. Let's hear the MIDI. So that's the track stack. If I were just to hear Omnisphere, this is what it sounds like. Nice sound, but when you add the vibraphone with it, it gives it more of a punch. So that's the kind of thing I did throughout this piece. I would layer sounds together to design the sounds. Instead of just using one sound, very often I would use 2 or even 3. Sometimes I just use one, like the next sound, which was after the soprano sax. Let's talk about the sax first. So this is an LA sax, soprano sax that I have. And I use the R compressor in the mix. I use this smooth opto preset a lot, and I just kind of lower the thresholds as needed. For instruments and some other things, I use smooth opto a lot. And this B31, this is a bus that's sending to a reverb. There's only 2 effects in the mix. There's a reverb and a delay. The reverb, for some reason I use this RC48 from Softtube. This came with Native Instruments Complete Ultimate. I don't usually use this, but I wanted to try something new, so I used this reverb. And the delay on the other bus, 32, is Replica, another Native Instruments effect. But on the saxophone, it's just the reverb and a little bit of compression to even things out. Back to the synthesizers, the next sound after that was Monarch from Native Instruments. This is a simulation of the Mini Moog. This is a really outstanding synthesizer. It's really great sounding. I used a preset called Chicks. I might have modified it, I don't remember. It's like a Chick Corea sound. Big fan of Chick Corea, Return to Forever, all that. So Monarch all by itself doesn't need anything else. I think in the mix I probably added some delay. That's usually what I do with Monarch. Here it is. Yeah, there's a little bit of delay. So if we were to hear that, let's hear the soprano sax followed by Monarch with the delay. So the sax has some reverb. Monarch has some delay. And I love the that intense vibrato that you get from Monarch when you turn up the modulation wheel. It sounds very Mini Moog. All right, and the next sound in the score was an electric guitar. And this is my Fender Stratocaster. And I use a distortion. So the distortion came from Guitar Rig, probably. Let's see, I use that a lot. Yep, Guitar Rig. It's one of those Ramfire presets called Crunch Monster. I don't remember if I modified it or not, but this is a good one. And the next sound was the viola. This is my daughter Maya playing her viola. And she just got a new bow. It sounds really good. Very simple, just a little bit of reverb and one of the Logic compressors this time. What's cool about the Logic Pro compressors is there's one plugin, but inside of it you have all these simulations of different classic hardware compressors. So I probably started with the Platinum Digital default one and then tried some of the other ones and then liked the way this one sounded with the same settings and then used that. She was recorded with an Avantone CV12 tube mic, saxophone too. I have that hanging in my little booth, as you saw in the video, so whatever was in there was using that. Although the two guitars that I played, the acoustic guitar and the classical guitar, I used an Avantone CK1 on a stand on the floor because I was sitting. For the viola and the soprano sax, I was standing, so I used the mic that I have hanging on the ceiling. I have a stand attached to the ceiling, which is convenient. The next sound was Alicia's keys. This is just a piano from Native Instruments. There's so many great pianos. This is one of my favorites. I also like the Grandeur a lot, Noir, but Alicia's keys is a really nice one, and there's just some reverb added. Very simple. The next one is another one of those track stacks. It's a combination. It's Reactor Spark combined with the Logic Pro ES1, those two. On the Reactor sound, here's Spark, by the way, it has a lot of knobs. This is a really great synthesizer. I added an effect to the Spark synthesizer. It's from Surge XT. So Surge XT is a free synthesizer. It's really outstanding. I just got this recently. It was recommended on YouTube somewhere, and I decided to give it a shot. And I was blown away how great this is. There's so much great stuff that's available for nothing. So it also comes with effects. So there's two things. There's the synthesizer, which I used later on in the piece, and then there's these effects. So I used this ensemble effect. Here's the two sounds together. Just two notes. But let's hear it with the guitar after, because that completes the phrase. So that's the two sounds together. So if we only had the Spark sound, let me turn off the ES1. Here's the ES1, by the way. Let's turn that off and just hear Spark. Sounds very different, right? Here's the ES1 by itself. Neither of them by themselves are that interesting, but when you combine them, it's better. All right, so we talked about the Spark ES1 combo. Next up is the acoustic guitar. This is my Martin DM. I've had this really long time. As mentioned earlier, it's going through the Avantone CK1, inexpensive little small diaphragm condenser mic, but it sounds good. And I use the Native Instruments choral effect, subtle chorus, and some reverb. Electric bass, this is the Fender Jazz Marcus Miller 5. They don't make that anymore. What a great bass. I've done a zillion gigs with this thing. It's outstanding electric bass, 5-string. I didn't mention before, the fretless bass and the electric bass were recorded through my EBS Gorm from the 90s. For the fretless, I turned off the EQ, but for the fretted bass, the Marcus Miller bass, I used the EQ on the Gorm. And then from there, it went into the Claret 8preX interface. And then on this track, there's a Logic compressor and also this vintage console EQ from Logic. This is a simulation of a Neve. I remember when I was playing this bass part, I wanted to slap it. And there were 4 notes. Do-do-do-do. The first 2 notes I was able to pop, and the second 2 notes I had a thumb on the D string. And the thumb notes always sounded kind of muddy and weak no matter what I did. So after doing it several times, I gave up. And I just plucked all 4 notes really hard, and it got a sort of slap kind of sound without slapping. It gave me the sound that I intended originally. Next up is another track stack. It's the OBXD and the ES2. So the OBXD is another free software instrument, although you could purchase it. I think there's a limitation with the free version, and if you buy it, I think they allow you to use it for commercial purposes. But this is an amazing simulation of an Oberheim synthesizer from the 70s. What a great thing to have. I highly recommend it. So I like using the OBXD inside of Complete Control from Native Instruments. It's not a Native Instruments product, but it shows up in Complete Control, and then when you're in there, you can save the presets in the Complete Control setup, which I think is more convenient for me, as opposed to using its own preset storage, which is not as convenient. So, like with Omnisphere and other instruments, I use Complete Control to select all my favorites. So when this is lit up, you can see my favorites down here. So the OBXD appears under User Content in Complete Control. Here it is. And then all the sounds here are the ones that I chose that I liked. To see all of them, you go inside the instrument itself. Let's hide this list over here. You can see all the presets under Programs. And there's a bunch of banks. There's all these different banks. Each one has a number of sounds. So right now we're in the first bank here. And then you look under Programs, there's all those sounds. So what I do is I went through all of them, and then using the native Instruments Complete Control software here, when I liked one, I just go here, File, Save As, and then it goes to the User Content folder. And these are all my favorites, so I don't have to go through all of the zillions of sounds that it comes with. I can go to my narrowed down list here. It's a much smaller list, and those are all really good sounds, in my opinion. So I used one of them in this and layered it with the ES2 from Logic. Looks like this was the ES2 must have come from the library presets because it has these effects. Let's hear the combination of OBXD and ES2. All of that for 3 notes. And all I did is just add a little bit of reverb over here to the combination of those 2 sounds. Okay, next up is Prism and Alchemy. So Prism is a really outstanding synthesizer from Reactor, and I made a track stack here where I combined it with Alchemy. So here's Prism. This is the simplified view. We can see the other view. There it is. Really great synthesizer. This comes with the Native Instruments Complete Ultimate Bundle that I have. So this is really good for bell type sounds, especially bright bell type sounds. And Alchemy is outstanding. This is Logic's fanciest synthesizer. I use this for really ambient and atmospheric sounds all the time, among other things. What a creative thing. So the 2 of them combined are really interesting. I like how this particular combination came out. Let's hear it. I use it for the really high chord. And I let it linger while all these other sounds happened. If you listen carefully, you can hear Prism and Alchemy sustaining almost to the end. Okay, then there was Noah with his Blessing bass trombone. Since he was in the booth, he was recording into the ceiling mic the Avantone CV12 tube condenser. Love that. And then the next sound was a combination of Native Instruments FM8 and Logic's E-piano. It's another track stack. Here's FM8. And then Logic's vintage electric piano with a Rhodes sound. Looks like I got this from the Logic library because there's these 2 effects that I probably didn't add. So after FM8 and the vintage electric piano, oh, I love this. So this is the Lounge Lizard from Applied Acoustics Systems. This is a model of a vintage electric piano. So it's like a Rhodes also, but it sounds different than the sample. I think the one in Logic that I just used on the previous sound is also a modeled Rhodes from the same company. I think they were the ones that created this instrument inside of Logic Pro. But I've had the Lounge Lizard a long time and I really like it. Looks like I was originally using some effects on it and I decided not to use them. And in the mix, it just has some reverb. The next sound is Massive from Native Instruments combined with the ES2 again from Logic with some effects probably from the library. Looks like I used the transpose effect to bring it up an octave so that they're both the same. Here's Massive. This is another one with a zillion sounds. I've yet to go through all of them, but I did go through a lot of them and save my favorites in Complete Control. All right, and then the combination goes through a delay. Let's hear that one. Yeah, you can really hear the delay on that. And then the next one is Cloud Supply and RetroSynth. So Cloud Supply, I don't think I ever used Cloud Supply. I have a student who uses it a lot, so I was thinking about it. It's one of those contact instruments from Native Instruments. Looks like I use it inside of Complete Control. It's a really interesting looking instrument, kind of a spacey sounding thing. And I doubled it with RetroSynth from Logic. This uses their wavetable synthesizer with all these effects. This looks like another library preset. And before it was recorded as audio, I applied these effects to the track stack itself. So I'm going through Waves, Puig Tech. I use this all the time. This is a simulation of the famous Pultec equalizer. And then it also has a flanger effect from Native Instruments called Flare. And then the whole thing all together with those effects and reverb and delay sounds like this. That interesting sound. The next one is a sound called Explode. What is that? So Explode is from Super 8. So this is another Native Instruments synthesizer, which is originally a Reactor ensemble, and now it's a standalone product that comes with Complete Ultimate. And once again, like all the synthesizers they make, I went through all the sounds and picked my favorites. So if you look on the side, these are all my choices down here. Limits the amount. If I get rid of this, I could see all of the sounds that it comes with, which is way more. And then with my favorites, still a lot, but not as many. It's like Explode was the last one. So I think this was the sound that had the really wide intervals in the music. Let's hear that. And you can hear the delay on it. It has delay and reverb. So then there's the classical guitar. This is my inexpensive Lucero nylon string guitar. I used a Waves EQ to get rid of the bottom and boost the high end, thin it out, and a Waves compressor. And there's some reverb added. And I put it on my left leg and angled it up and used my yoga block under my foot. Okay, next up is Fast Poly. Where is that from? So Fast Poly is a sound from Surge XT. This is that instrument that I was talking about earlier because I used the effect on one of the other sounds. This is the synthesizer. This is an amazing synthesizer. This is a completely free synthesizer. So if you like collecting great synthesizers, you need to have this one. This is a really great, very impressive synthesizer. It's not that hard to use, and it can do so many different things. It has a lot of different types of synthesis in it. So what does this sound like? That's a cool sound, and it has no effects added there. Over here I have some reverb added to it. That's it. So that reverb is added, but all that weird pitch stuff is just part of the sound. Okay, next up is the soprano recorder. I've had this a really long time. It costs $5 at Sam Ash, I think. In Long Island I bought this. It's yellow. It's a very simple little instrument. And I just said, all right, let me pull that off the wall and play 2 notes. The choice of all these instruments was pretty arbitrary, by the way. Here's the soprano recorder. And it's interesting how the delay effect is causing it to pitch down. That's this B32 is going to Replica, which is doing some weird pitch stuff. So other than the reverb and the delay, I've got Waves H-Comp. This is a compressor. I try to use as many different EQs and compressors as possible. The whole point of this project is to explore lots of things. And if I find that I like something from using it here, maybe I'll use it more often in other projects. After the recorder is a sort of mix of Reactor ensembles. I felt like I needed to get more Reactor into this. So I used 3 of them. Contour, Razor, and Rounds. These are all ensembles that come with the Complete Ultimate bundle from Native Instruments. And this is what they look like. If you open up the stack, they're all in Complete Control because I think I saved presets for all of them. In Reactor language, it's called a snapshot. Actually, when you save a favorite in your user library, that's called a preset. If you saved it in the ensemble itself, it's called a snapshot. So I use Contour plus Razor plus Rounds. Here they are all together. Here's Contour by itself. It's a short little pluck. Here's Razor. That's sort of the main sound. And then Soft Criminal. That's Rounds. By the way, when I use my initials after the name of a sound, that means that I used an existing sound that came with the instrument and I modified it a little bit. So I keep the same name but just add my initials to show that I did something different than the original. So here's rounds again. And I'm going to add razor, and then add the little pluck from contour to get the full sound. And there's the whole thing. Almost done. For the next sound, I wanted to include something from the Reactor Factory library. And I also included Form, which is another one of those complete ultimate reactor ensembles. Here's what they sound like together. And let's hear them by themselves. Okay, two-osk, or two-os. OSC is short for oscillator, so is it os or osk? I'm going to call it osk. Two-osk is a synthesizer from the Reactor Factory library. I like this one a lot. So I use this sound, and then I combined it with Form, which I have in complete control. Form is amazing. You drop a sample in here, and it does all kinds of crazy stuff to it. So here's two-osk by itself. Sort of a gargly sound. And then here's Form, much clearer sound. You combine them, it makes the Form sound, which is clear, have some kind of fuzziness to it. I think it's better combined. That's why I did that. And then the last sound is another combination. So this is Massive X, which is a very new Native Instruments synthesizer. And I also used something from the Roland Cloud Concerto. I only have something that's free from this. There was some offer for a free synthesizer, and I wanted to include something from here. I never used anything from this ever. So here's Massive X and this Roland Cloud sound. So that's the last chord of the piece. So I've got Massive X in complete control. And once again, I like saving my favorites in complete control. And then the Roland instrument that I use from the Cloud Concerto is this sound called Space Harp. This comes from the Anthology collection up here. So there's a bunch of really good sounds that come for free with this. A lot of these companies give away free stuff to entice you to buy some of their other things. I would buy a lot of their things, but I have too much already, so probably not going to happen anytime soon. Although I was very impressed with what came with this. The Roland sounds are different than other things that I have. So the Massive and Roland Cloud sound, we're just going through some reverb in the mix, and that's it. I forgot to mention earlier on the sound that had the combination of contour, razor, and rounds. In the mix, it went through one of Logic's vintage graphic EQ plugins. This looks like a simulation of an API EQ. Haven't used this a lot, but I wanted to give it a shot here. And I also have this effect called Spread, which I think I got recently for free, although it doesn't seem to be free anymore. But this is really cool what this does. This is from DJ Swivel. It changes the stereo field by widening the sounds in a unique way. There are other plugins that do this. I know Logic has one. I think it's called the Direction Mixer. And Waves has something called the S1. I didn't compare it to those. This is something that I got probably around the time I made the video, so I thought I'd give it a shot. But it's interesting what it does. I like it. Those are all the sounds. The only other thing that happens at the end of the mix is I always put something on the stereo out. I like using the solid bus compressor from Native Instruments. And when I use this, I try to not have more than 4 dB of compression. I always compare what it sounds like with and without it to make sure it's not ruining the sound. I like how it kind of glues things together in a way, but you have to be careful with this because if you do too much, it makes it sound smaller. And then I always use the L3 Ultra Maximizer from Waves for mastering. I tend to use the high-res CD Master preset and then mix into that. Once again, I try not to have more than 4 dB of attenuation on the right with this preset. If it's doing more than that, I will back off the volume of what's going into it without changing the preset. And if I'm not making a file that goes to a lower bit depth than what I started with, I will get rid of the dither and quantize over here. I think I started this session at 48K with 24-bit, and I prepared the file as if it was going to CD to be 44.1 kilohertz and 16 bits. So I use the 16-bit quantizer, type 1 dither, and ultra shaping. But once again, if I was going to leave it at 4824, I would just get rid of everything, like put it on 24, turn off the dither, and get rid of the shaping. So it just uses the maximizer limiter here without messing with the digital audio parameters. So that's the integration theme. Hopefully this was informative.